doesn't have to be lonely. And Cynthia Thurlow is one that is in those upper ranks. She's a great friend, former client, and it was through her channels that you came onto my radar. And she's just a lovely individual. Really proud of her for her second book just coming out. But um, I want to start with who Dr. Gersh is and how you got into this space, because a lot of what I was able to find on you starts in the later years, like Princeton, and when you started really going down the academic path. So, where did you grow up? Um, what um, what got you into being interested in medicine? Was there like something in particular that was like a catalyst that you said, one day I want to be a doctor"?
Well, going back into my childhood, I was very influenced by my father. My mother was the nurturer. My father was the sort of academic guide. Okay. And he was an early feminist, actually, because
Oh,
he told me from the day I can have any memory that I could be anything, that there was nothing barring women from doing anything. And but I was also limited in that he actually introduced me to only 3 career paths. I could only do one of 3 things, and I actually never considered anything else. I didn't really think they were on the possibility list. So the 3 choices I had, which actually makes it kinda easy to make your selection when you only have 3 to choose from. You go to, like, the Cheesecake Factory and there's,
yeah,
like, 20 pages and, like, "What am I gonna order here?" I can't figure
right.
this out. But when you only have 3 choices for a career, it makes it, like, simpler because nowadays people, "Oh, I don't know, there's so many things." So it was one of the following: teacher, lawyer, doctor. That was it. These were the service careers. That's how it was viewed. You want to be of service. So I thought about it, teacher, doctor, lawyer, and I said, well, I'm good in science, so I picked doctor. So they're all service, type careers. You're going to help people. And so that was the path I chose, and it was from a very early age. I'm going to be a doctor, and but I wanted to be more than just a science knowledge person. So I took many courses. Like in college, I majored in history and then I took all the science classes extra that I had to take as the pre med requirements, and in the history department at Princeton, you had great leeway in what you took. Like, kind of everything could be history. So I did a lot of art history. So this was what I called my enrichment. Because on the side I was taking physiology and I was taking organic chemistry and physics. So I had to take all those classes too. But this was my enrichment. So I took a lot of art history. I took philosophy courses, all went under the guidance of I could take it as my history major. And so I wanted to have a lot of background in other things, so I wouldn't be just narrow in my knowledge base. So that's kind of the path that I took. And so there was no great epiphany. It was just, I choose that. And I never looked back. I never second thought it. But then once you choose a career of medicine, oh my gosh, there's so many paths you can take in medicine. How many different career paths are under the guidance and the umbrella of medicine? You could go into research. So I was offered one of my medical school acceptances was at NYU, and it was the MD PhD program. So, and I thought about that. I could go into academia, I could get a PhD along with my MD degree, go into research and be an academic doctor. And I thought about it, and then I decided, that really isn't my path. I want to be a clinician. I want to be in the rank and file of practicing doctors, really, you know, right there doing all the deliveries and surgeries and taking care of people and really getting to know them. So, that was another big decision I had to make between going down the PhD, MD career academic path, doing research and writing papers. And I chose I want to be a clinician and just work with people. I had no great aspirations of being famous or being on stages. I just wanted to help women. I wanted to help each woman to meet her optimistic goals for having a family and living a healthy, long life, and so on. And over the years, I've morphed. My career has morphed. My practice has morphed. My goals and so on have morphed. Like after many years, 25 years of doing obstetrics, high risk obstetrics, thousands of deliveries. I populated Orange County, California. I walk around and I've everyone. I delivered your baby. I delivered your baby. So, I
Wow.
delivered so many babies. But after 25 years, I felt it was time to move on. It was a very painful decision when you leave skill sets behind, but I felt it was time for a change because also I needed to get some sleep. And I always fill the gap. So when I gave up obstetrics, I took up being a forensic medical expert. And that's my legal career, which my father also encouraged me to do. He said, if you want to have a functioning legal system, you need to have knowledgeable, qualified, honest experts because the lawyer is the advocate. The expert is the one who educates the jury on the facts of the case. And that's what the expert does. So for many years, I became an expert in terms of being a forensic expert, and, I've been in many, a witness stand, educating the
Oh,
jury, many high-risk profile cases involving all kinds of things, um, accidents and employment law, and also like environmental law cases involving toxic waste dumps and how it affected fertility or other reproductive issues. So I've been in, deposition. So I learned a lot of law. That was my legal career. And then I really wanted to become the educator that I wasn't really, because I chose not to go into academics. But then I did. I became on the faculty. I was on the faculty at USC Medical School as a clinician doing teaching surgery. So for many years, I taught surgery to the residents at USC Keck Medical School, and now I'm on the faculty teaching and doing grading of papers and helping to contribute to the curriculum of the fellowship in integrative medicine, which I did back in 2010 to 2012 at the University of Arizona School of Medicine. And then, as you mentioned, I lecture and I do a lot of courses and I teach. So I'm into academia too. So, I've kind of traveled through many different paths in my medical career. So it's been many years and lots of evolution. So I always believe in everyone should have chapters in their life. You don't have to do everything exactly the same from day one to day end.
yes, absolutely, absolutely, and certainly your evidence of that. We're going back to so your father was somewhat of a feminist. It's interesting. He said you could be anything you want in life, but here's three options. You
Right.
choose door A, B, or C, right? And so I find that um I find that funny. And you chose to go the doctor route, and then you also chose to go down the female health, women's health route. Was there was there also a correlation to your dad's like, hey, because I mean at that time, I imagine that was not the norm for a strong male figure to tell female back then, like you can be whatever you want to be, right? Like you can excel. I mean, that was at a kind of a turning point um where it was a very male dominated because this is this in the 60s, 70s?
And yeah,
When was
in the 70s. Yeah.
in the 70s? Okay. Okay. So was how influential was your father in choosing the female path, like women's health path? Was there correlation
Well,
there or no?
there actually once I went to the medical world, he was hands off at that point. Now my
Okay.
mom,
Okay.
on the other hand, actually just kept saying to me in a very nice way, "You realize that if you go into OBGYN, that's a very hard that's a very hard specialty in terms of the hours. You're going to have many emergencies. You're going to be called in weekends, nights, holidays. Women don't schedule their babies till,
Mhm.
when they're going to go into labor. And so she just said, you have to, if you, she was the work-life balance contributor, but I said, I thought about it and this is what I want to do. Back at that time, there were very few women. I was actually, now, if you look at the population of doctors who are in OBGYN, it is extremely high percentage of women, something
Mm,
like 80% of all practicing OBGYNs now are female doctors.
okay.
But it wasn't that way. It was a tiny, tiny number back in the day. And so I was one of very few women that went into the field. It seems like night and day if you weren't there. That just wasn't it wasn't a common thing. It was, well, medicine was way more male dominated in general and in the surgical specialties. And OBGYN is a surgical specialty, which is one of the things I loved about it. It actually is everything. It's an office based care. You have longevity with patients. You can see them year after year. It's not a one and done kind of a thing. Like you do one surgery, you never see them again. It's not
Mm,
like that. You have ongoing care. You have an office medical practice, plus you do surgical procedures. I thought I loved the adrenaline rushes that I got when they said, it's kind of weird, but I felt, like saving lives and doing emergency care, when it's like someone's hemorrhaging, the baby's
mm,
coming out feet first and nobody knew it. They're 3 months premature. What are you going to do? So all these things, I thrived on that. I like it's like if you like to watch The Pit or something of the ER shows, actually
yes.
obstetrics is like that. It's ER on steroids when you're dealing with obstetrics and all the emergencies that can happen. So,
Yeah.
it was, my choice, and I was definitely informed and warned by my mother that this is not an easy one for work-life balance, and, but I felt one of the things I wanted to do. Also, we always are, and this happens a lot in medicine, sometimes people get teased about it, that we're typically drawn to something that we personally have some kind of a magnetic draw to. And I myself self-diagnosed myself with polycystic ovary syndrome back in the day, and I was really brushed off in very, I thought, rude ways by the high academic doctors when I went to see
Mm,
them in my medical school, and I complained about not having a period for 2 years, and they just brushed all my concerns aside, and I had to figure it out myself. And then it's like, wait a minute, women are being gaslit by their own doctors. What the heck?
sure.
So I felt this was my sort of a thing. And so I wanted to help women. But I also wanted to have the variety. I guess, I don't know what condition that is from the psychiatric point of view, but I like variety. I didn't want to just do one thing. I didn't want to go to an office and do the same, like, outpatient care day after day. I didn't want to just be in the operating room as a surgeon day after day. I really wanted the variety, and there's nothing that has more variety as a medical specialty than OBGYN.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a book I want to say it's The Purpose of Man or something, but it talks about how, and completely applicable to females as well. Especially with what you're saying, but that every man needs to have like an adventure to be had, a damsel to rescue, and um, like they need to go on a venture. And something to build or something like that. Like, in order to feel complete. And it sounds like, you say a psychological condition. I don't think it's a condition. I think it's just like the condition of the human that, that just wants that excitement. I mean, I was in law enforcement for a period of time. 5 years of it was with the SWAT team and special operations sides. And there's something about having like a really mundane, like kind of like boring day to all of a sudden, you get that call and it's just like now the adrenaline's through the roof and,
Yeah.
there's the action and things and the stories that are told, camaraderie that happens with those that you're, suddenly like, dealing with this emergency situation for. Our son he was a month early because he was footling breached. And so my wife, uh, she went in for her first of the weekly appointments, in that last final, 4-week period before he was due. And the doctor was checking her and felt what she thought was like the fingertips above his head. So she's like, kind of pushing on the stomach, trying to get our son to move his what she thought was his hand. Well, the little digits aren't moving, that she can feel it there. So she goes and gets the ultrasound machine, finds that he had flipped and his foot was like coming down the birth canal. My wife and I were in our early 20s. We first child, like, and so the next 30 minutes was this conversation with the doc saying, look, if he breaks the birth canal, or his foot catches, and the umbilical cord comes out of the vagina, that's an emergency, that's a real problem. And so she says, Matt, what you're gonna have to do is you're going to have to stuff the umbilical cord back up, you're gonna have to call 911, and she walks us through these steps. And then she sends us home, and she says, call me tomorrow, and we'll check in and things. And so my wife, we're like, you okay? So we go home and we sit on the back porch, and we're just like, we're not saying anything because we're just like expecting at any moment like an umbilical cord to come shooting out of her vagina for our son, and this medical emergency to happen, right? And so we're super uh like we're just like, we're not
Yeah.
saying to each other. Well, so the next morning we call, nothing happens, no emergency happens. But the next morning, my wife calls. She's been having contractions,
Contraction.
right? Yeah, all night. And so they say, come in. And I forget what the numbers were, but the doctor was like, hey, were these contractions bad? And she says, well, they're moderate. She's like, well, you've dilated quite a bit. So long story short is, the doc says, are you guys ready to be parents? And we're like, no, we have a month. We're supposed to have a month. And she's like, no, we've got to do a C-section, emergency C-section, because you're too dilated. He's not going to switch back. Like, the probability of there
Mhm.
being a problem is high if we don't bring him into the world now. So they whisk my wife away. They send me to like a changing room for me to put on scrubs. And like 20 minutes later, I'm walking into this emergency room, and she's laying there with the blue, you know,
Mhm.
tarp thing in front of her face she can't see, and the little stool. So I'm sitting next to her, and like I'm giving her a play by play. So the doc cuts her open, and she's doing things, and I'm kind of like looking. Now I was in law enforcement, so none of it bothered me. And I see something get removed from like the innards, like it was inside of her body, and kind of gets like pulled and put aside, right? I don't know what part of like what's happening there, but I'm walking my wife through this, and I'm giving her a play by play, and she's just like shaking from adrenaline. And then I see the foot come out, and then I see the other foot, and then the whole baby. And it was the craziest thing, uh, Doc, because it was like, eh, you know, we weren't supposed to be parents, but then in like just a few moments, we were parents, right? I mean, when I said no, we weren't, like, we're supposed to have
Oh,
another
yeah.
month, right? We're supposed to have another
Right.
month, and all of a sudden we're parents, and it was like the coolest science project I had ever been a part of, like getting to see this happen in real time. Um, and then and he was totally fine. He didn't need to go to the NICU at all. He was fine. Everything was great after that. Um, so you're sharing your story about like the office visits, and that's our scenario. We went through all of the like, she was going to do like more of a natural birth. So we were going to all like the breathing
Mhm.
classes, and like all of the like we that's what we were prepared for. And then we found ourselves in somewhat of an emergency situation, and that everything turned out great. But it's like we walked through those steps that you just described with our own child and our own doc. And man, do you develop a really special relationship with your doctor when that happens. At least that was the case for us. Like we became friends with them, or husband. Like, um And so I can that was our experience as well.
Yeah. Well, imagine doing that multiple times a week as the doctor. I can't even imagine how many home videos have me in them
Oh,
because,
you're kidding.
everyone would take their video cameras into the labor and delivery area
Yeah.
and they would always be videoing everything. So I'm a film star,
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
on so many home videos, you wouldn't believe it.
That's it. Well, 25 years you said, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
and I
25
I had
years.
a very, very busy obstetrical practice, so, yeah, there was, like, delivery after delivery and, like, there would be, emergencies, and so, and
Yeah.
it was really amazing. I mean, I'm very proud of my record for delivering so many babies and having, like, no complications and great outcomes, and, but, like, all things come to an end, and then, I moved into new areas. So, my
Mhm.
father gave me the choices, doctor, lawyer, and
Teacher.
teacher, and I kinda
Yeah.
did all of them in a way. I
Yeah.
had, my legal forensic medical expert practice for many years, and now, I've been teaching a lot. So and I've
Yeah.
been teaching actually going back, earlier in my career because I always had affiliations as a clinical faculty member with a university, with a medical school. So I guess I got all of it in. So dad would be proud.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. Well, and so I definitely wanna get into, like, that transition because integrative health is a really big thing, and and I wanna get into, like, the modern day your modern day practice for sure, but I don't wanna skip over the fact that you you are you're part of, like, the leading charge early in the day for a lot of different things. So, Princeton, you made it through in 3 years, I if I understand it correctly, so you got your,
I
um,
did. So
bachelor's in 3, your
I'm one
undergrad?
of the few students who actually used the advanced placement credits from the AP courses
Uh-huh.
to jump ahead. So I actually entered Princeton University as a sophomore because I had
Mhm.
so many advanced placement courses that I scored high that they gave me credit. I got college credit for my high school AP classes. And I saved my parents the tuition for a whole year of college. That was really my main motivator, is to save my parents a year of college tuition, and, I like I said, I took extra courses each semester. So normally you would take 4, I took 5, so that I got in all the science courses plus all the requirements for my history major. So I kind of did extra. So I kinda had 4
Mhm.
years in 3 years anyway, and, so it was good. I was ready, to move on to medical school after 3 years of college. Probably most people could, but it all worked out well, and, in terms of, like you mentioned, integrative medicine. So I got into that from the very get-go, only I didn't realize how ahead of the curve I was. I never quite put it all together that when I started my practice, when the reason I started my own practice was because I wanted to have flexibility with my schedule, because I wanted to be able to make my own schedule, that if I wanted to take time off because I had kids and I wanted to go to a classroom play or do something, that like a field trip, and I wanted to be the field trip mom or something. I wanted to be
Mhm.
able to step into that role as well. So I felt the only way I could do it is if I had total control of my schedule, which means I had to be my own boss. And but it's kind of scary, but I just felt that that was my path at that time. Also, independent doctor medical practices were pretty common at that time. And I did interview with a bunch of different medical practices that were private practices to see if I could fit in. And I actually didn't. They were all
Mm.
100% male practices, except for one that was a single female doctor, and, she was, like, wanting to work very little. So, basically, I would be her sort of ghost. I didn't want to be
Mhm.
somebody's ghost doctor that
Mhm.
I would just pretend I was her and fill in so she didn't have to work. That really wasn't my ideal of what I was looking for.
Mhm.
So, but after interviewing with a lot of these men practices, and not that they weren't nice guys and all, but I realized that I would still be under their thumb. I wouldn't really be making my own decisions about anything. And I watched and saw what they did, and I said, you know what? If they could do it, I could do it. That was when it really became like I could actually just start from scratch. And so I
Mhm.
hired someone. Well, I found someone. I didn't have to actually hire them. That was good because they got the commission from the place where I got my office space. So I found someone, a real estate commercial person, who was able to scout around to find office space for me. And there was a building, and I actually built out the space from scratch. I had a designer come in. We designed the space, and the whole thing was furnished and designed and everything by me from scratch. And I went to a course. It was called How to Establish a Medical Practice. It was put on by the California
Wow.
Medical Association, and it was a 2-day course. That was my MBA in medicine, a 2-day course on how to establish a medical practice. And this was before computers, so they taught how to do all the little how to do paper records, how to set them up, how to use stickers to alphabetize them, how to keep track of the year, put the dates on, and all these different things with stickers and color coding so you could find them. So if they got misfiled, you could just go like this and you'd see the difference in the color and you'd know it was
Mhm.
misfiled and all that kind of thing. How to do keep track of the finances, with paper cards and all these things, and the recall systems and everything, all in just 2 days. And then just from that, started my own business and took control. And then it grew pretty fast. And I did the first year, I did for a few months, I did moonlighting with some of the HMOs like Kaiser. And at the time, it was called Ross Luce. That was another HMO. So I did moonlighting and went back and forth to my practice. And that stopped after like about 6 months. I was already in the black and I was able to just do my own practice and not have to do moonlighting at all. But from the get-go, very early on, and it's hard for me to know, it just intuitively felt right. I brought on board what I called my ancillaries. So in my practice, I had, in addition to doctors, and I rapidly added more doctors and then nurse practitioners to my practice, and it grew. But I also had a psychologist, a Chinese medicine practitioner, a nutritionist, a massage therapist, a biofeedback specialist. I had all these different my ancillaries doing integrative medicine, although I had no special training other than the conventional medical world, residency or
Mhm.
the traditional medical school. But I just knew there was more than just, prescribing pharmaceuticals and doing surgery. And so I brought all those ancillaries in. And I never realized I was like decades ahead of the curve at the time. And when the time came that I stopped doing obstetrics and I only did GYN, not only did I go into medical forensic expert work, but I felt that I needed to expand my therapeutic toolbox, that I myself needed more training because I didn't have enough to offer to my patients. Now that I wasn't doing obstetrics, I felt a void. So that's when I started searching for like, what can I do to help my patients better? And I started taking random courses with naturopathic doctors. I said, who the heck are these people? But they seem to have like a nice approach to like help the body to heal itself by, you know, uh, accessing the body's own inherent healing mechanisms. It just seemed well, that sounds like a good idea to me.
Mhm.
And then I was at a conference up in Portland that was a naturopathic conference, and there was one other doctor who was teaching, giving lectures at this conference, and I was the one MD in the entire audience. And I went up to her during a break, and her name is Dr. Lodog. And I said, Dr. Lodog, I'm really lost. I'm just taking these random conferences and I'm, talking to people. I have no like organization in terms of what I'm doing, but I know I need to do something more. And she said, well, I'm actually in charge of the fellowship in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona School of Medicine. Why don't you like come and do it. And the new program is starting like in 2 weeks. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I went home that night on a Sunday night. I flew home from Portland back to Southern California. I filled out the application, and 2 weeks later, I was in Tucson, Arizona, and I started the fellowship. I was one, and then that was a 2-year fellowship. And then I became one of the first, I think, in the world dual board certified OBGYNs and in the new field of integrative medicine, which became a legitimate board certification. Like, just like if you're board certified in emergency medicine or internal medicine or whatnot, it's under the same board of medical specialties as like um, interventional radiologists and emergency room doctors. So it's like a real recognized board specialty.
Mhm.
I had to sit for 4 hours and take an exam, and I had to qualify in order to even take the exam and so on. So I was one of the first in the world to become dual board certified in those two fields. And I never looked back. Once you see what you can do to help people in different ways than just the conventional, you can't ever go back. You can't do
Mhm.
anything but kind of keep moving forward. And so that sort of began my real personal journey into educating myself about all the areas of medicine that had advanced since I was back way back in medical school, things that they didn't even know about back then.
Mhm.
And learning more about other things, herbals, lifestyle medicine, how to deal with stress and improve sleep. I did a 2-year program in environmental medicine so I could understand the effects of all the toxicants that we live among, that are ubiquitous and get into our bodies, the impact on fertility, reproductive health, pregnancies, and metabolic health. So they call them, a lot of them, diabesogens, chemicals that induce diabetes, obesity, and how to deal with that. So I just sort of went on a learning kick that never stopped.
You know, it's awesome. You know, you mentioned that, you weren't interested in being another doctor's ghost, and essentially being the person that would step in so that they could have that time freedom. You mentioned that the flexibility that comes for, be that soccer mom and or the field trips, whatever. Um, and those are reasons why a lot of providers they start looking outside of the hospital system they work for or the clinic that they work for when they start to feel like I'm just providing opportunity for either, that flexibility or building a practice that's profitable for somebody else. And I want to do it myself. And there's a variety of reasons why a provider steps out into the unknown and opens up their own practice. One of the things that it also opens up the doors for are what you've just described, which is the ability to evolve and to be able to pursue new challenges, new opportunities, new different ways of practicing medicine,
Mhm.
um, and then it allows for you to be able to connect with the world about it, which is when you're I mean, thank God you chose the path that you did, doc, because you're one of the first in the world to accomplish certain things. And when we talked about integrative medicine back then, especially, it was people didn't know what that meant. It needed to be explained. It needed to be educated, right? And so your dad said be a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer. You chose to be all three throughout your journey, and we're all thankful for it as a result. You know the the business of medicine podcast. It's you're speaking to the reason why I do this podcast, and I bring experts like you on is because it is important that from a professional standpoint and personal standpoint, you have that flexibility to be that mom, that wife, that, have the interest to go skiing or the beach or
Mhm.
whatever it is that you like to do, while at the same time, can have a professional legacy as well, and to be able to venture down the certain paths. And when you're a provider in somebody else's practice, you don't always get that ability to become known for for something or having that flexibility. And so going back to a reason why a lot of providers um they venture out and they take the risk is because they want to be able to have all those things that a private practice is meant to be able to give, or at least thought. But it's not that easy, right? Owning a business is not easy.
No.
Like you went to a 2 day MBA course, and so amongst all of the the expertise that you have on the clinical side, and what what are some of the things that you might offer if there's a provider that would be thinking like, I'm thinking about leaving the hospital that I work for, or I'm thinking about starting my own practice, um, or they maybe have just like they're in their first year or two of it, but they're feeling a little bit lost, like they can't be on podcasts, they can't go speak, they you know they're busy with the one-on-one patient care side of it. Like what kind of guidance or, you know, teaching moments might you offer those those providers?
Well, I would have to say that you have to be dedicated to the long view because if you start out now from complete scratch, like say you're leaving an established business that's like, say, a healthcare system that's associated with a hospital or some other university, something where you're an employed doctor in a big
Mhm.
system, and you're just going to go out from scratch and start a practice. You need to be prepared that it's gonna take quite a while, and, unless you're in a specific market that I'm not aware of, the details of, where there's a great need for someone just like you and you're filling a void that really needs filling. But in general, in my market where I am, there's so many doctors, like, that's the the beauty and the bad of living in
Mhm.
a wonderful place. There's so many doctors. There's no doctor
Mhm.
shortage in Orange County, California,
Mhm.
absolutely 0 shortage,
Mhm.
and we have a plethora of healthcare systems and doctors and all this. So, depending on your market where you are, you have to be prepared to, like, I took out a this is a long time ago. I took out a $100,000 loan, and this is crazy because it was when interest rates were literally incredible. It was 22%, okay?
Oh,
I
wow.
had to
Mhm.
take out a personally guaranteed loan of 100,000, which is now probably comparable to at least 500,000, okay,
Sure.
of a personally guaranteed loan at an interest rate of 22%, and that was the all I had available to me. And, I did moonlighting, like I mentioned. I thought I'd be doing moonlighting for 2 years. It turned out I was able to be in the black and get by after 6 months. But, be prepared to do moonlighting, get a job if you can, like at an urgent care or working locums locally or something like that to pay some of the bills, and then expect to wear many hats because you can't afford to buy the, you know, to pay for a lot of employees to do a
Mhm.
lot of the work. So in the beginning, I started out and I had one employee, one person who had to answer the phones, uh, and then I would do my own rooming of the patients, and then she would have to do the billing because back in the day, there we had sometimes we did billing for patients, and then when so she had to do everything, and I did everything. So I took home the ledgers, and at the time, I paid the bills. I was the bookkeeper. I mean, I
Mhm.
had to do that because I couldn't afford to pay for all these employees. And then as I got bigger, I had 2 employees. I had the medical assistant who did a lot of things, and then I had the office manager. And so, you have to be able to wear many hats. What a lot of people do is if they have relatives, children, spouses, they put them to work to help them. It's a real family business, like old time family business where everybody chips in, and helps out. And, so if you're going to start from scratch and you don't have like a bunch of patients waiting to jump in your door and be your patients, and you're going to build from scratch. And then what else did I do? I went out and I had my business cards and I went out and I met every doctor in the community. I mean, I would take cookies to their office. I would take them out to lunch. I schmoozed like crazy, networked. I went to meetings. I went to everything to meet all the doctors in my community so they would know who I was, so I could get referrals and I could refer back to them too. So it was a two-way street because I needed to know who I was going to refer to also. Because once
Mhm.
you're out of a big healthcare system, you want to refer to other doctors like you who are in
Mhm.
private practice. And so
Mhm.
you have your own little network. It's a separate, like, different society of doctors and practitioners
Mhm.
who are no longer associated with these big entities. And you want to get to know who they are so you can refer to them. And so, yeah, I spent time going out, taking people out to lunch, to dinner, to shows, to get them to know me, to meet them. And of course, it's kind of fun. You make friends too that way, right? You make friends that could
Mhm.
last the rest of your life. And so it's hard work. You have to be dedicated to this, to growing. And that's why it's totally fine if you can find someone who you really align with, who's already in practice, that isn't going to make you their ghost. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's not
Mhm.
like, okay, now
Mhm.
I'm going to be gone now for the next 3 months. This is what I was saying. Well, I'm going to take off months at a time and you've just run the practice for me. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, that's like, that's not what I was looking for. But if you find someone
Mhm.
where the practice is growing, so then you're not going to be like they're just, they're gopher and they're filling. You're actually going to grow the practice and maybe with it becoming yours, like the old
Mhm.
fashioned where you mentor. That's what I
Mhm.
would love to do, as well.
Mhm.
The older doctor who's experienced mentors you and helps you with the idea of allowing you to become yourself and being your own doctor for, your expressing your own personality and going in
Mhm.
directions that you want, and maybe that you take over the practice, like the old idea that you would come in, you would be affiliates, you would work together, you would get to know each other, and then it would become like the hand down, you take over the
Mhm.
practice, that sort of thing. So there's nothing wrong with doing that because starting from scratch is really hard. And I think it's harder now than it was when I started, because when I started, there were some big entities. There was some, like there was Kaiser, there was some other big HMOs, but at that time, there were academic hospitals, but they didn't have
Mhm.
anything like they have now, all these primary care doctors, all of these
Mhm.
doctors working for them. It was mostly the doctors who were the teachers, the academics, and they were tertiary care. They were more
Mhm.
the referrals for the really esoteric kinds of problems, not your
Mhm.
mundane, like everyday things, okay? Like I have a cough and earache or something. Now they're everything. The
Mhm.
big universities, they have doctors that have urgent care centers everywhere, walk-in clinics. They do primary care. They do every specialty. So they're totally in competition with all the doctors in private practice. There's no distinction there at all with, we're just the high level tertiary care. Not at all. They're everything, every level of care. So now it's much harder, I think, because being in private practice is hard to compete with these entities. If you're in the healthcare system where you're taking insurance, insurance pays facility fees and higher fees for complexity, even when there is no complexity, to the universities and to these big entities. They can make twice as much money with the insurance reimbursements as a doctor in private practice for the exact same visit and exactly the same service provided. So it's a real gimmicky thing that puts
Mhm.
all the cards in the basket of the big entities. So it is really hard for
Mhm.
doctors to start from total scratch nowadays. So, like, make sure you check the landscape, make sure you have enough pocketed cash, to keep you
Mhm.
going for a
Mhm.
while. But the thing is that if you are offering something that's unique and special, whether it is something in the healthcare field where you're going to spend more time, like sort of concierge type level care, that you're going to actually be available, you're going to give more time to the patients that they really seek instead of 7-minute visits, or you're in a niche that's highly in demand or very hard to get, or you're doing something that, like we'll say the worried well are interested in, like longevity medicine, or you're
Mhm.
going into aesthetics and everybody wants to look gorgeous and young and so on. But, so find your niche, see if there's a market, check your market out wherever you want to establish to make sure that there's actually like room for you to grow and that there are doctors that will refer to you and that you can refer back. You have created a referral network and so on. So it's a big undertaking. And if there is someone out there that you can join that isn't going to make you their ghost, then, maybe that's not a bad way to go either. Look at where it's going. What's the
Right there.
5-year plan, the 10-year
Mhm.
plan? Because you're not in it for 1 year, I hope.
Mhm.
This is like your future.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a distinct difference between a practice that's looking for that quote unquote ghost, the hey, fill in for me so that I can go in and tour the world versus join me and help me build a thriving practice. Those are
Right.
completely separate things, and I think everybody would agree that um, that there it's not of real interest to come in and take on all the responsibility and all the stress and things of being a clinic owner without really having the benefits, just to play that ghost role. But I've certainly found it to be the case where, you know, providers, most providers actually don't want to be the entrepreneur. They're happy to be an entrepreneur. They're happy to come in and help. They're going to treat the business as if it were their own. They're going to treat the patients in the clinic as if they were the actual owner, but they're not. And they're happy to do that because they don't want the risk. They don't want the sleepless
Mhm.
nights. They don't want the loans at 22% and and to have to sign the dotted line. And so it's a real winning recipe um, for the both the clinic owner and all the providers, the MAs, the estheticians, whoever wants to join that. And I think it was a really smart move. In hindsight, you look back and it's quite obvious that with the practice that you built, having multiple different specialties inside of it. Um, I think today that is every bit of a winning type strategy um, than it was back then, too, because, it's integrative medicine is really it's the future, right? And it's your ability, the clinic's ability to be able to diagnose and then treat somebody, um, regardless of really what they're dealing with is really essential for them. And so you want other providers to come in with different kind of skill sets that are wanting to help you grow the clinic. Something else that you said that I think is really important and interesting is that um, y- they're taking on a lot of risk. They're signing up to do a lot of work, and they have to be okay with that. How long did it take for it took you 6 months to get into the black for you to be able to stop the moonlighting thing, but how long were you having to wear multiple different hats? How long before you were able to finally achieve that flexibility and kind of like that time freedom that you um, were after when you opened your practice to begin with? Was that within the first year? Did it take multiple years?
Well, I would say that in terms of running the business, I wore probably multiple hats for about 2 years in
Hmm.
terms of doing jobs that could be and typically are done by an employee, but I had to
Hmm.
do them myself.
Hmm.
But in terms of having the freedom, I took that from day one. So I always decided when I would take off, when I could have time to do things that had to do with family. So that was from day one. But, it becomes hard though when your schedule is full and then you say, well, what, I'd really like to take tomorrow afternoon off, like, it becomes not practical. Like, wait a minute, I have
Yeah.
patients all afternoon. It's not like you can just say, disappear patients and just reappear in another day. I mean, that's, first of all, very painful for patients to be canceled
Yeah.
and rescheduled at the last minute. Even it's
Yeah.
not the last minute, even when it's like weeks ahead. They made arrangements, they made plans. So it's not easy. So it's not as easy as it sounds. You can plan ahead, but to make changes when people already are booked into the slots is not so easy. So it's it's not as easy as I thought it would be in terms of making tremendous flexibility in your schedule. Because although when things come up, if you beg, plead, and borrow and do whatever you have to, you can still, find other spaces for patients, but you don't want to do it all the time. You don't want to tell people that your appointment is now gone. We're going to use that slot so Dr. Gersh can go and spend do a field trip with her kids. It's not easy
Yeah.
to do that. So,
Yeah.
it's not as easy as I thought once you really get a full schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the tough part because then you realize you can't be sick or you can't have like a random adventure that you want to go on or, without there being challenges, and you need a team. You need to be able to have others that can help you, um, see those patients and
Mhm.
really make it so that you're able to spend more time doing the things that you enjoy. So, what as you look back, you've spent a lot of your time on the teaching side, as you mentioned. You speak on stages. What percentage of your week or month is actually seeing patients on the clinical side versus more of the either the educational side, the entrepreneurial side, the authors? Like, what percentage of your
Well,
time is seeing patients?
well, right now it's probably 95% on a typical week. Like,
Okay.
I'll block off time. A lot of times when I block off time, it's like mostly my lunchtime, which is
Hmm.
sort of like it's like open book time. I use it for
Hmm.
something else a lot of
Hmm.
times. Or because I'm in California, a lot of people are on the East Coast, I'll do bookings at 7, even sometimes 6:30 in the morning because on the East Coast, 3 hours
Yeah.
ahead, it actually makes sense for them.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
I do things that don't eat into my office time as much as they just eat into my time, but or
Yeah.
sometimes my sleep time, but they don't take up my patient care time as much as might be, if I just like blocked off time. Now, when I travel, of course, then it can be very challenging for my schedule
Hmm.
of patients because I do take off time, but it comes sort of in clumps. Like, for example, the fall. The fall is a killer because it's like fall conference season. So
Hmm.
it's very challenging in September, October, and into November, and a little bit December before the Christmas holidays, where there are so many conferences. So often I have to turn things down that I would love to do because
Mhm,
there are like 3 things on the same weekend.
mhm.
In fact,
Yeah.
in October, this is kind of crazy. So in October, I'm speaking at a wonderful conference, the IMMH, that's in San Diego, and then I was invited to speak by a friend in London to speak at the conference there to do 2 lectures, and I really didn't want to have to miss either one. So actually, the people for like you said, it's a small world, so the people in charge of each of the conferences actually know each other, and they were like, "Why did you do it on my weekend? You did it on my weekend," you know? But, they worked it out together and with me that I'm going to San Diego. I'm speaking in the morning on Thursday at that conference, which is in San Diego, and then later that evening, I'm flying to London, and then I get there on Friday afternoon in London, and then I'm doing 2 lectures on Saturday in London, and then I'm flying home on Sunday. So this is the
Wow.
craziness of the fall conference season. Then I was
Yeah.
invited to do 2 conferences on the same weekend, another one of these things, and one was in, Sao Paulo, Brazil, the other in Bogota, Colombia. And so they worked it out together. So I'm speaking on Friday in Sao Paulo, and then I'm flying to Bogota, and then the next day I'm speaking in Bogota, and I'm going 2 days early, approximately 2 days early to Brazil, and then I'm spending 2 days additional in Colombia so that I could do a little bit of sightseeing because I don't know when and if I'll ever be back. So
Yeah.
I just added 2 days at the beginning and the end for each of those different cities so I could do a little bit of sightseeing. But it's crazy. This is my life in the fall, and then every other weekend, it seems like there's something that I'm doing. I'm
Uh,
flying all over the place. So my schedule is a disaster in the fall, but then what I have to do, and I do this, I work when I'm home. Other times I'll work some Saturdays, and I'll mostly doing telemedicine, so I'm not disrupting the lives of my
mhm.
staff. And I work some Saturdays to try to take up some of the lost time to fill in the slots that I people can't get appointments and such. So the summer is usually pretty quiet. There's not a lot of conferences in the summer, and
Mhm.
because people are on vacation, but sometimes, like, I did last year and the year before that, I did conferences on cruise ships, and
Oh,
so I was
oh.
gone, like, last summer in July no, actually, it was the end of June into July, I did lecturing. It's like university at sea, so doctors can get continuing medical education hours while taking a fun cruise. So they're
Mhm.
regular cruises, and then you could do lectures on the days at sea to get continuing medical education hours, and I did those. I was the lecturer on the days at sea, so they could get all these medical education hours and then have fun. So then I was gone for just a little over a week in the middle of the summer there. So it's like I work Saturdays to try to accommodate patients. So it's crazy, but I'm a very much a full time clinician, and then I tack on all this other stuff. So here, there, everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Would you change it? Is it playing out the way that you had hoped it'd be playing out at this point, or,
Well, yes and no. I'm going a little crazy, with a little it's a little over the top sometimes.
okay.
Also, when I speak at conferences and I do things like that, I have to create new slide decks. They don't create
Mm,
themselves. And I try to
mhm,
have everything updated. And I don't have just a single niche because women's healthcare, I was told a long time ago, is not a niche. So
mhm,
I talk about everything related to menstrual cycles, reproduction, environmental medicine, menopause, perimenopause, and then every organ system, like whether it's talks on the immune system, the cardiovascular, neurological, musculoskeletal. So I have to create different slide decks for all these different things and update and to particular time amount allotted for the talk and so on. And everything is referenced, and I try to make sure all the slides look attractive and so on. And then I have to have the right number. So that takes, oh my goodness, that takes a lot of time. It's not like I just show up at a conference and I have a magically produced slide deck. I'm the creator of the
yeah,
slide decks. I don't have
yeah,
like someone doing that for me. So I have
yeah,
to do all that. And of course, that takes a lot of, which is kind of fun. Every time I get a new topic, I become a new expert, in that new subject.
mhm,
So I learn a lot every time I create new slide decks and I, learn about heat shock proteins. I didn't really know that much about it and, different types of peptides and mitochondria. And so I learn more all the time, but in doing research to create new talks and slide decks and so on. But it takes up a lot of my time, nights,
yeah,
weekends. So it's what I'm going to try to do is block off some time during regular working hours, and then I'm going to try to hire more people. I already have some wonderful people helping me because I can't do all this forever alone.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
have right now two wonderful nurse practitioners, an RN, and a physician assistant, and I'm probably going to hire more people as to help me. So they're not ghosting me. They're really we're
sure,
working together as a team. And
mhm,
because I have to, you can see this is a little over the top doing all the
mhm,
things that I'm doing. And so I do need to be realistic. I also plan to write a new book. I have 3 books,
oh,
but I have not had a new book for about, I know not everybody writes books every year, but it's been like 3, 4 years since maybe it's like 4 years now, yeah, time flies, since I had a book out, and I
mm,
really have more books to write. I also write
mm,
scientific articles that get published in peer-reviewed journals. I just wrote one
mhm,
of those that hopefully will be sent out for review and then get published, and I wanna write more articles, scientific, like review articles, hypothesis articles to be published in some of the major journals. I have articles published in Mayo Clinic Proceedings and, high-end journals, British Medical Journal. So, I try to get published in really high-end respectable journals,
Yeah.
not the, pay for play journals where you can just pay money and they publish anything. They really are journals like that. So,
Yeah.
so it's like a lot. I really need to block off some work time so I maintain my sleep time. So, yeah,
Mhm.
it's you can't it's really hard to do everything. I have to be honest. But so I'm trying to make plans to be more realistic about how to budget my time.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and that just goes to show that, the we never arrive, right? So as long as we maintain that hunger for growth and more, and what's next, we're always asking that question, what's next? There's never a point where we arrive. And you mean, you really just laid it out beautifully, where it's like you have all these goals and dreams and aspirations still, and something has got to give along the way, right? I mean, to
Yeah.
be published in a peer reviewed journal that's not pay to play, you've got to have all of your facts in order. You've got to have your research. You've got to be able to put it in front of your peers, have them review it, and then
Mhm.
ultimately get signed off on. The book. I mean, when it's one thing to write a book, then you have to go to the book launch, and you have to have people buy the book, right? And because if you're going to have somebody publish it, then um, chances are you're going to want some money up front, to write the book from a publisher, and so there's a whole process to all of this and making all of this stuff happen. Um, and something's always going to have to give along the way, right? But the key
Right.
is that we're not giving up the things that are important. We're not giving up the sleep, which is really important for our health. We're not giving up on important things of our relationships with ourselves, with our spouse, their kids, grandkids, whoever. But like the things that are most important to us, we stay um, firmly attached to, and then what we're giving in the process are things that it's okay to relinquish control to, like, maybe patients to other providers, maybe processes and systems to, even AI. AI is making it, that's something we implement with practices all the time, is systems and processes and automations and things that AI is now doing far better than humans can do, from a back end business perspective, that ultimately on a daily basis buys back an hour or two here and there. Before you know it, you've got 15, 18 hours a month of available time from AI. So there's all kinds of different ways that are important to implement to be able to make that room, so it's not so much of a sacrifice. At least sacrificing the things that we are really important to us. So I love the fact that you're still pursuing more. You're still asking what's next. I mean, you've been at this since the 80s, and your foot is still firmly on the gas pedal. And I think that's something that is definitely admirable and respectable. So I guess we'll wrap it up with a final question, which is you've already sort of explained like what's next. As you look back and you were to think, there's other providers um, that are wanting to expand their own private practice, and we'll assume that many of them have not accomplished what you have. They haven't published any books. They're not traveling the world, having conferences from one end of the world to the other, fighting over how to get you there, on the same weekend, and patients and things. So we'll say that they're not quite that far along. What advice do you have for them that you feel was essential? Were you ever given any kind of advice from a mentor, a coach, a conference, something where, like, from a business owner, CEO, a leader standpoint, like, really was impactful for you?
Well, I would say probably the most impactful was when I did the fellowship in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona School of Medicine. And I felt for the first time as I was moving into the integrative healthcare arena that I found my tribe. I found
Mhm.
other practitioners. There were, at the time, I think they take different types now, but it was all either MDs or nurse practitioners. Those were the only people at that time that were allowed into the fellowship to take the course.
Mhm.
And we all went around in a big circle. There were only in my class, like a little over 60 of us in the class. And we each told our story, like, why are you here? Like, what brought you into taking a fellowship in integrative medicine? And everyone had their story, and it was always personal about someone in their family or themselves who had had basically sort of a traumatic incident involving healthcare
Mhm.
and, something that went wrong, and they just felt that they needed to expand what I call, the therapeutic toolbox. They needed to do more. They needed to learn more, and they weren't satisfied with where they were in terms of their abilities to work with patients. And that just sort of motivated me to like get that sort of spark that you
Mhm.
will always do best for your patients when you have an open mind, when you look at all different aspects of health and the environment, and that you don't have a narrow view of anything, and you see the body as a totality of all the
Mhm.
organ systems working this incredible symphony and complexity of interactions, and how it all comes together to bring health or illness when things are not right.
Mhm.
So I think that sort of inspired me to always look forward, to become an independent thinker, to question
Mhm.
everything, to not accept the dogma. I have students that rotate through my practice. Like right now, I have a lovely nurse practitioner in women's health student. And she said to me just yesterday, she said, "So, how is it that you think about all these things, that you take a different approach, and you've thought through, like, this doesn't make sense. Why are people doing it? Why are they prescribing it? Why are they doing it this way?" And the answer was, I just think, it's like
Mhm.
nobody told me that this is wrong, conventional medicine's approach to this is wrong, that we need to think differently. It's just if you just look at everything as a puzzle, a challenge, and you never take anything as fixed dogma, that you
Mhm.
challenge everything and you think from a scientific point of view, everything scientific. How does this work? How could this be logical? Is it logical? Is there a better way? So always having your thinking cap on. I mean, back in the day when I was doing a lot of surgeries, I could kick myself a few times. I would always be in the operating room and I would say, why don't we have a device that does this, that, the other? Like, why do we not have something like that? And I never realized that I was inventing and I did
Yeah.
nothing with my ideas. Then
Mhm.
15 years later, somebody had a device that I had thought about 15 years earlier
Yep.
and did nothing. So I could have been an inventor. I can't tell you how many times over I had ideas, but I never acted on them. So the
Mhm.
thing is, don't make the mistakes that I made in the past of having new ideas and then just saying, "Oh, well, nobody does anything that like that yet. I'll wait for someone else
Mhm.
to come up with the method to actually
Mhm.
make that happen." Don't do that. If you're a creative thinker, act on it. You can be the inventor. There are people that work with you. I never understood that. If I didn't know how to make a device, but other people do, if you come up with the idea. So now, think independently, think creatively, do your own thing, Don't break laws, don't be a crazy person, but, think creatively and don't accept dogma. And, really that got into me, I think, when I did the fellowship, and I've never looked back, and I could never look back and do things the old way or think the old ways.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's so powerful, and I mean, just imagine what becomes possible when you are your own thinker, you put your own thinking cap on, but then there's that fellowship side of it, the tribe side of it that you mentioned, where you're surrounded by others doing the same thing. Like imagine what becomes possible when you challenge status quo, you think for yourself, and you're surrounded by others who are all problem solving too. And the kinds of problems, the amounts of problems, the size of problems that could be fixed. Um, when you have that tribe. So I think that you hit on a lot of really important points there. Dr. Gersh, this has been really enlightening and very fun, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to share it. You have such a wide range of experiences and expertise and things that we could go down a whole host of different topics, but it, what we were able to cover was
Yeah.
fantastic, and I think it's going to be really helpful to those that are going down this path, in a variety of different ways. But just to learn, success really does leave clues, and it's always so nice when you have those that have such expertise willing to take some time out of their day to share some of those successes and leave those clues for others to pick up and run with. So thank you again for coming on, and really do appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Awesome. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoy, and we will be chatting soon.